Welcome to the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast, where we dive into inspiring stories, thrilling adventures, and expert insights from leaders and legends across the outdoor adventure community. Whether you're an avid hiker, passionate camper, or adventure traveler, each episode brings you up close and personal with guests who've lived it, explored it, and made it their mission to share their experiences with you. Let's get after it. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jonathan Dirksen, a Globe Trotting storyteller whose life has spanned the Rainforest of Bolivia, the peaks of the Himalaya, and the classroom of Canada. From fixing films for Discovery Channel to preserving indigenous cultures and wild places, Jonathan brings a powerful mix of adventure, education, and heart to every story he tells. Hey Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Rick. This is a nice privilege.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun conversation. All you guys, you've done some pretty wild things, and our connection through Sergio was pretty fun. He's done some wild things, so I'm looking forward to hearing all about what you do. Let's start with your love of photography. Where'd that come from?
It goes back to, first, my father was a photographer on the side. So many of us. He was a Canadian diplomat overseas, but because he was in interesting places, he always carried his Nikon F1, which was a fully manual camera.
Yeah, classic.
And he took awesome pictures and always shared them with us. And so that camera became mine. That was my first camera. And then
Cool.
Along with a little tiny point and shoot. And then I passed that one, the F1, on to my son. And then there were a couple other people. Like there was, in high school, there was a guy, Wolfgang Schuler, who was a professional photographer and photojournalist. And he used to go up into the Andes Mountains when I was in South America going to high school. And this guy would disappear for a month, come back beat up, dirty, smelly. And he would double as our photography teacher when he was around. Oh, cool. And he would show us these pictures that he had taken at, for example, something called a tinku, which was this traditional war that every year 2 villages in the Bolivian Altiplano, the highlands, have. And they just beat the crap out of each other.
An annual war.
An annual war. And it's the way they avoid a longer war.
Oh, okay.
And they just beat the snot out of each other. And he took pictures of people with gashes in their heads showing their brain, and people lying dead in the street. And this is what it was like, this true war zone.
Yeah.
And he would bring these pictures back. And I just thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be a photojournalist. He was really instrumental. Yeah.
Was it specifically a war zone photojournalist or just photojournalist?
Him or me?
No, you decided to.
I was entertaining this. I was very single and thinking about war zone photojournalism. That really appealed to me. Huh. Then university, I ended up taking a year off with my brother to backpack through South America. And that whole, not so much war zone, but photojournalism as activism was really interesting to me because we spent a lot of time in Chile, and it was during the time that Augusto Pinochet was in power. And we got to see firsthand how people operate under a dictator and under authoritarian rule, and it was brutal. It was awful.
Oh, wow, I'll bet. Yeah,
and meeting people, one lady that we talked to, she ended up having what's called a burning necklace put around her neck. And it was, what they do is they throw a tire over your head and light it on fire.
Oh my God.
And she survived.
Wow.
And amazing, weird coincidence, but she ends up, we spoke to her before that happened, but then a year later, 2 years later, she shows up at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, where I was attending school, as a public speaker. And so I managed to go and talk to her backstage later. And these kinds of things, being punished for freedom of speech, real freedom of speech, was something that really opened my eyes.
Yeah. We're getting a little dose of that now.
Yeah.
We won't go down that road.
I know it.
So you've lived in some amazing places, Malaysia, Japan, Bolivia, and now British Columbia. How have those experiences shaped your connection to the outdoors and your lens as a storyteller?
So each place came with its unique experiences. My earliest memories are actually from the States when I was 2 or 3, but Malaysia really was where we started to explore and get out on our own a lot. My parents were very bohemian in some ways. They liked to see us
You're free range kids,
get up on our own. Yeah. They weren't hippies, but they were letting us free range. Let's put it that way.
Perfect.
And so like Malaysia, it was almost every weekend we went into the jungle, and we would, it was legal back then. We would butterfly hunt. Now it's not.
Oh, wow.
So we had this huge butterfly collection, and we'd have these crowning butterflies we'd try to catch. And my dad, and especially my dad, he had some dealings through his work with the local tribal groups. So we would go up into the forest and meet with tribal people. And one
Wow.
time, one time he says, "We're going to a headhunting village, guys. So you're going to have to be super quiet." And so we get to this village, and we're hiding behind these big elephant ear plants. And we're watching these women just in sarongs, just topless in sarongs, and
Yeah.
it's blowing our minds. We're little kids, and all of a sudden this branch cracks behind us, and there's a villager standing there. We scream, and my dad's laughing. He goes, "Boys, it's not a headhunting village; it's just a village." So we had these visions of being cooked in a pot. So he was
I
cruel,
can
but
imagine.
he added spice to it. And Japan, when I talk about stories, these are the memories that come back as soon as you say Malaysia.
Yeah.
Japan was skiing in the Japan Alps.
Oh
And,
man, beautiful.
we ended up buying with some other families an old Japanese farmhouse.
Oh,
And
cool.
so we'd go and stay out of that farmhouse in the countryside during the summer. And we attended Nishimachi International School, which was a private school that really focused on the outdoors. And that was really instrumental in getting us outside and speaking Japanese too.
Where in Japan was this?
So that was Tokyo, but then
Okay.
the actual camp was outside of Tokyo and north of the city, I think. And yeah, and it was through the school that we really developed this sense of, okay, who were the farmers in Japan, for example, and that sort of thing. And then trips to outer islands were amazing. We did a lot of travel that way.
I got to go over there a couple times with Tatsuno.
Oh, did you?
To visit Tatsuno at Mobile, yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Very fun, yeah.
It's
That's
hard
a
not
cool
to fall in
country.
love.
That's a cool country.
So much variety. And the other thing it really instilled in us, even though my parents have been raised Mennonites, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mennonites, but
A little bit.
like not conservative, obviously. But my dad was very interested in Buddhism. They had lived in Japan before when my brother was born there. And I was very interested in Zen Buddhism just naturally. And so we used to go sneak out to the local temples and hang out with the monks. And that was pretty fun. Like it was an unusual experience. So yeah, Japan was special. And then Bolivia introduced us to the Andes. And Bolivia, what's so amazing about Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, and even into Chile is the amount of historical evidence, right? You just have these amazing ruins and evidence of civilizations, and none of it's excavated.
Right.
So you're just going into these places like Indiana Jones, literally, and finding pots and skulls and elongated skulls and all these things that are the stuff of myth almost.
Amazing, yeah.
So that was high altitude climbing and getting used to pushing yourself. And so Bolivia was really amazing in high school.
That's on my list. I've never been there, but that's obviously
on the list. We'll set you up. Rick.
Yeah. Your audio sounds better when you're leaning in close like that. Just FYI.
Okay.
Cool. I'm curious about your expeditions to the Andes and Altiplano. Did I just ask that?
I think you were going to ask about what draws us to remote places. Is that the next one?
I got my list here. The documentary work, I think, is where I'm at.
Oh, okay.
So let's talk about your documentary work, especially Tattoo Hunter. I'm going to butcher this. Arunachal Pradesh.
Yeah, so Arunachal Pradesh.
Yeah, what was that?
I had already worked with National Geographic on World's Most Dangerous Whatever series, and
right.
The focus for our particular episode was roads. And I'd grown up I went to high school in Bolivia for 3 or 4 years. It was traveling what's known as the world's most dangerous road, La Carretera de la Muerte.
I think I've seen something about that on one of those stations. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you go on, you'll see the one that we did back in about 2007. But traveling that road so many times took the edge off of it. But when you saw other people traveling the road and watched their reaction, it was diaper time often, because you had these 2,000-3,000 foot drops on one side of it, and then this
I've been on those roads. Yep.
On the other side, yeah, and drivers quite reckless because they're used to doing the road.
Exactly. Yeah. They're like taxi cabs in Tijuana. They just drive like a bat out of hell.
Yeah, and so we had covered that. It was actually where I met Sergio Bolivian. He and I we worked together on that particular shoot with National Geographic. He did the logistics, and I helped as a cultural liaison and camera and so on. But so that bounced to the director from that show actually asked if I was dialed into any indigenous groups that practice tattooing in India, because he knew I lived in India. And I happened to be friends with the family of the chief minister of the state of Arunachal Pradesh. His kids had been students of mine up in the mountains where we lived in India.
Oh, okay.
An old British American school. And so I took advantage of that contact and I said, hey guys, I would love to come and do some scouting for this show. And can I get some permits? Because it's an area that's restricted to foreign travel, or at least at that time it was. And they're like, oh, they were so excited. And I was excited. So they managed to get me into the state, got me some permits. And Discovery Channel was very good at getting you under the radar and working as I don't want to say spy, but as eyes and ears on the ground.
Yeah.
And they sent me in with this high-end, tiny little camera. It was so much fun. And so I just went to these two tribal groups. One was the Ani tribe in just east of Bhutan. And so I filmed among those people, and I'd been there once before. And so I knew some people going back. Fascinating group of people with facial tattoos and a long history of tattooing. But then I was introduced to this other group called the Wanchos. And I had never heard of them except maybe through books and stuff. And they said, we could get you out there, but we can't travel with you because the insurgents out there tried to kill my dad, dad, back in the day.
Wow.
And so I said, how do I get out there? They said, you take this helicopter and then you go here and we get you the permits and blah, blah, blah. They got me there. It was amazing. I spent a few weeks among the Wancho.
And they were totally fine with you? They were pleasant and hospitable?
They were a little baffled why I was there. They weren't used to tourists.
I'll bet, yeah.
I was coming in as this, I think they thought of me as maybe a professor from a university or something. I couldn't know. But they didn't even, these people are really quite remote and not with many outside ties. Amazing to see the tattooing though. These tattooed from head to foot.
Yeah.
And so that's what got me to Arunachal Pradesh. And then it was because of the scouting logs that I presented to Discovery Channel after that, suggesting storylines and that sort of thing, that they said, okay, we'll commit the X number of dollars to that and we'll call it India's Royal Tattoo because it was going to have to do with the Wanchos and their royal tattoos related to their emperors, queens, and so on.
Wow, that's amazing. Very cool.
Yeah, so it was, pretty amazing.
Man, what a great job. What a great job and amazing stories. I bet we could go on all day.
You just cut me off when I need to
I'm digging it so far.
Because there's lots to tell.
So now you're working on a documentary about illegal mining in Madidi National Park?
Yeah,
I got that right? Okay.
Yeah.
One of the most biodiverse places on Earth. What's happening there and how'd you get involved with this project?
Yeah, so the documentary has been finished for about a year.
Okay.
It's called Voices for Madidi, and in Spanish, Voces por el Madidi. It's a departure from your standard documentary in that there's exactly half and half English and Spanish. And I use subtitles for both English and Spanish. I just wanted it to be, we went in on equal footing and I wanted that to be reflected in the subtitling. But anyway, Madidi is this area that's considered to be, and Haley Stewart, one of your past guests, would tell you the same. It's known as the most biodiverse place on planet Earth.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And when you get there, you start to see why. And let's say you just take birds, for example. And in one given spot, like there's a place called Sadiri Lodge. There are about close to 500 species of birds just around that area. But then when you start to look at the biodiversity, the broader diversity within Bolivia, but especially along the Andean corridor there, which is such a crucial watershed as well, there's something like 1,100 bird species. And so looking just at birds as a microcosm to the macrocosm is stunning. As you travel through it, you start to see the fish life, the aquatic life, and then the life in trees and all the mammals and different species that occupy the trees, all the way down to the tiniest fungus. And just like anywhere in the Amazon, it just blows you away. And if you have somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, it's even more stunning because they can point out those little minutiae that make being in the jungle incredibly powerful. So tied to that are numerous indigenous groups that have called this area, this part of like I called it the Andean corridor, have called it home. There's the Chimanes and the Musatan Indians and the who are the ones that are featured in this documentary, Voices for Madidi. And it was that group of people, the Chupiamanos, who I had some contact with over the years, starting as far back as 1983.
Wow.
My brother and I, some friends, went down and dug out canoes down this river called the Beni River and ended up in a town called Rurenabaque, which is the gateway to the park now.
Huh.
In those days, the park didn't even exist, but we did some exploring on our own, had a guide that took us up in a little motorboat or motorized dugout canoe. And again, it's my parents giving us free range, right? I was 16, my brother was 17. No, I was anyway, close to that. And so that initial contact led to, I found out later that teachers at my school in Bolivia had also had contact with them and had actually started bringing books and school supplies to their remote village. And it's the first time I had heard about this remote village called San Jose. It was the only human habitation in 1,000 square miles.
Wow.
And I loved hearing that. I thought, okay, I've got to get
that's the place I got to go, right? Yeah.
So later, my wife and I, when we went back to Bolivia to teach, and my wife was nursing with Peace Corps and then with our school, we bought a Jeep. We just hit the road, and we ended up in that area just at the time it was becoming a national park, 1995.
Wow, cool.
And that was a really joyous time for those people because they were saying, hey, we've got this piece of paper that says our indigenous lands are going to be protected. And
that's very cool. That's got to be huge for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was the efforts of some of the people from the different tribal groups, but then also part was back in 1984, 3-4, or maybe 282. I always get the date wrong, but early 80s, a guy named Yossi Ginsburg, an Israeli guy, got lost in the jungle in that area, in the Madidi.
Yeah.
He was knocking about in the jungle for 3 weeks, almost died. A guy that he was with, a friend who had unfortunately gotten separated from Yossi, managed to survive too and get to Rurenabaque, the town, first. He put together a little search party, and that was a dugout canoe with 3 of them in it, and went looking for Yossi, and they ended up finding him on the almost dead on the edge of the river called the Tuichi River. So the culmination of that experience was Yossi's book called Back from Tuichi. It became an international bestseller, and then later, much later, became the movie called The Jungle, starring Daniel Radcliffe, about 5 years ago.
Okay.
But anyway, it became this movie. And so Sergio and I ended up getting in contact with and got to know Yossi Ginsburg, the guy who survived this ordeal. And when I was a teacher teaching filmmaking, I would get Yossi to call in and talk to the kids about his ordeal and ask questions about the book versus the movie and these kinds of things. And so that became our initial experience with the Madidi over a pretty long period of time. And then Sergio and I also did a coffee table book together called Madidi: An Uncertain Future. He did all the photography and I did the text. Nobody reads the text, but anyway, I did the text.
Got to be there, though. It's got to be there.
It's got to do it. But what it allowed me to do is Sergio helped get me into the Madidi region, meeting all these different movers and shakers within the park.
Wow.
And I got to really understand what these people were facing, as they call them, the trials and tribulations of being indigenous within an indigenous territory that's under threat by loggers, miners, people wanting to hunt.
Oh, yeah, they just want to go strip the ground bare of
Exactly.
everything. And it's plants and animals.
Oh, it's unfortunately the easiest way to clear land for really crappy agriculture is to just slash and burn.
Yep.
All around the edges of the park, you have what's called a buffer zone. And the people who put the park together were smart, and they said, okay, you know what? People are going to come in and they're going to try to do their thing in this region. But then we have the red zone, the core of the park that we're going to really be able to protect because it's so rugged and people just can't access it and so on and so forth. And that part of the park was very well protected until Bolivian, Chinese, and other mining companies started doing their thing up in the highlands. And where does water trickle? People always ask, is there a trickle-down effect in Bolivia? And I'm saying not financially, but when it comes to mercury poisoning of rivers, yes.
Everywhere, yeah.
And you have these comparatively unsafe mining practices up in the highlands, dumping mercury-laced backwash or whatever it is into the rivers. And of course, the problem is that gets into the sediment of the river.
Yep.
And Haley Stewart told you about this, and she talks about,
I think she
sediment.
mentioned the Tuichi, but I don't think she told the story.
Yeah, and that gets into the fish, especially the bottom feeders like the catfish. Catfish is one of the most popular eating fish. So you're guaranteed that almost every indigenous group along that river, especially farther downstream, are going to be affected. And so the documentary in Voices for Madidi, what we ended up looking at was following that story, including damming the river, which is a horrible idea because that's their road, and there are all kinds of indigenous communities along the river. But then the poisoning of the waters with mercury, and looking at one of the most vulnerable communities called the Eseeja people, another tribal group in a small community of Eyiyo Kibo, it's called. And those people were found in a fairly recent study to have monumental levels of mercury. So much so that their birth defects are almost the norm.
Wow.
And then things like rheumatoid arthritis, cognitive delay, deformities like single eye in the middle of the forehead, babies that die at childbirth. And the number of stories that we heard through people like Haley and others who had been there recently was really depressing, really astounding.
I bet, yeah.
We thought, okay, you know what? This is a story. And when you talk about story, you say, where is the story going to go? Originally, we were going to meet with Yossi, the guy who survived the jungle ordeal, but he bailed on us 2 weeks before our shoot. So the plan B was actually better, because here you're talking to the people on the ground, living it and seeing their environment change very quickly. And it's dangerous.
Yeah,
if you talk to Haley now, all she wants to do is teach indigenous people how to raft so they have a secondary source of income through adventure rafting or kayaking. She recently tried to get up into the higher level reaches of the Tuichi River, and right away did not feel safe. And I'll let her tell those stories, but that's not an isolated event. The mining cooperatives are very powerful, and they feel emboldened by government backing.
Well, they probably have some of the deepest pockets over there too, so they're powerful because of the financial resources.
And then on top of that, the Chinese have done good and bad things in Bolivia. In my opinion, the worst thing they've done is bypassed environmental protection practices to fast track mining in a given area. And I don't know if the US or Canadians would do any better with it. They would make it look like they were, but it's companies. My dad used to be in mining, and I visited these mines, and I know firsthand what they look like and what's happened to the irrigation, just like the tar sands in Alberta disaster for our watersheds. So that lit a fire under my butt too. And again, so starting with photojournalism and then in a war zone, this wasn't that different. Here was the war zone video instead of photography as a medium.
You've got a foot in both the creative and educational worlds. How has teaching journalism and filmmaking influenced your approach to storytelling? Obviously, you've seen all these destructions and bad things happen. That's probably pretty motivating and, I don't want to say easy, but a little simple to storytell.
It was a little, if you talk to my students, they'll give you their take on what the class was like. But I'm showing stuff. I want the kids to stop being so complacent, so sedentary. And if it's about the future's theirs, it's ours, but a period of time. And they're going to have to be the ones who do the cleanup, unfortunately, just like we've had to clean up after the boomers. Showing things like The Cove and Food Inc. And I don't know if you know any of these ones, but, The Social Dilemma, which is about wartime.
Saw all those,
all of these kind of work together to look at things like our environment, how we deal with people overseas, and so on and so forth. And I just wanted them to watch things that would move them, and they did, or at least they saw that it moved me.
And there's some inspiration there.
And so I had very good rapport with the students, and the classes it's an unusual class because it's an elective, which means that you're getting kids generally who want to be there. And there was always a core group that were very serious because Vancouver especially has a big film industry. And we had a lot of international students who were interested in this kind of thing too. The greatest joy was to see students pick up on what interested them. It didn't have to be what interested them, but how do they translate that passion to something that's of their own design? And usually it was with a conscience, right? So
Yep.
the idea
Hmm.
is, okay, if you're going to go into building dramas, right, and you're going to be the cinematographer, how do you deal with people so that they give you the best of what they can when you're on set? Or took a whole group of students down to the east side of the Andes, and we shot this documentary, Rescue in the Andes. It was still amateur documenting because I had amateurs with me, but
Uh-huh.
the great thing was that wasn't the point of the documentary. The point was for them to experience this wildlife refuge that we were filming at, and the couple who ran that place. It was astounding. And one girl especially who had graduated from a school that I had taught at, and she was my student, and she was an assistant, and she went in as a narrator.
Hmm.
And it was really great to see them change and grow while we were at this wildlife refuge. They saw the efforts to which somebody would go to help a sick monkey come back to
No,
feel
yeah. A lot of people
rehabilitated.
do that. Yeah.
And so it was really an amazing experience, even though it wasn't broadcast or anything like that. So you work with
Mm-hmm.
small groups of people. So the translation of story, you build a story, but then, as one of your questions asked later, there's always the behind the scenes. And the
Right.
behind the scenes is about people, and it's about animals, and it's about the connection between the two and nature, at least in the stuff that we do. So that's been really valuable between the educational and techie world of filming.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Hopefully that answers your question.
I think it does. Yeah. So what about gear? What are you out there filming or photographing in the Andes or Amazon with? And what's always maybe a couple other things that you just never leave home without?
So Alex Honnold, he went with Raynon Ozturk. I don't know if you know these guys,
Uh-huh.
big
Know of
climbers.
them. I've met them over the years, but I don't really know
Yeah,
them.
I'm
Yeah.
sure being where you are. And they went up into I think it was the Roraima area, anyway, Venezuela, where the big tepuis are, these big flat top mountains like you see in
Yep.
Up.
Yep. I've seen those. Yep.
And the documentary is called Tepui, I think. Raynon Ozturk went in with Sony equipment, the new A1, and it's a mirrorless small format camera, but does everything that what the FX6 does now. Plus, it's 8K. On top of that, like the F6, Sony F6 is a 4K camera. This was a much smaller one with 8K capabilities and more waterproofness.
Oh, okay.
So the biggest deal in the jungle, for example, in the environments where I go, is humidity
Yep.
and overheating because of that humidity. So trying to find gear like your main workhorse, something that won't overheat and won't get too fogged up and so on and so forth is really difficult.
I can imagine.
I still ran into some issues, and you can see that Raynon Ozturk did too when he was filming Tepui, but that inspired me to buy that particular piece of gear. The
Got
other
you.
piece of gear that is incredible is a Sachtler tripod,
Huh.
and you're going to pay a lot more for with the release of a couple of snaps, it automatically drops into place, and you can
Wow.
very
Cool.
easily maneuver it and level it. It's an expensive piece of equipment, but that was crucial to everywhere we went. I actually had a guy who just carried my tripod, and I paid
Oh,
him
yeah.
for it.
He'd drop it, and all you have to do is go put the
And he
camera on
would
it and
drop
go.
it. I showed
Yeah.
him how to
Yeah. Yeah.
set it up. So
Yeah.
exactly. And
Perfect.
then he would
Yeah.
mount my camera, I'd be ready to go.
Yeah.
And so that was really crucial. But I guess something else too was even over those things, you could have a mediocre camera, you can have basic tripod, but the most important thing to me is getting something that records good sound,
Yeah. Yeah.
like your mic right now.
Yeah.
And I found that the very best equipment was Tentacles. They're these little
Hmm.
wireless mics,
Hmm.
like a lavalier mic, and they are very discreet, and you keep them out of sight because it always looks tacky when you've got
Yep. You don't want to see it.
a
Yep.
mic showing.
Yep.
So these are very easily hidden. They pick up beautifully, and they
Hmm.
handle any conditions. And that was thanks to a guy named Keith Partridge, a cinematographer for BBC and other channels. He put me onto that. He actually ran the Banff Mountain Adventure filmmaker
Oh,
show.
cool. Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
And anyway, so that piece of equipment alone has
We'll have to
changed.
link to that in the show notes. I've never heard of those tentacles.
Yeah, so Tentacles, it's kind of like a Tascam or what's it called, a Zoom,
Yeah.
but not super expensive,
Hmm.
and it just does exactly what they say it's going to. And you can have multiple mics, and on your camera, if you buy this one extra piece of equipment, you can sync all the different audio.
Oh,
So
wow.
you can have one mic over here doing ambient sound, and then a mic overhead, a mic over here with someone else talking,
Uh-huh.
and you can wirelessly sync that. So in
That's
post,
handy. Yeah.
so helpful. Yeah,
That's handy.
really
Yeah.
good piece. So
That's
those would
pretty
be my
cool.
main. And one other thing too is that I was just going to say that somebody like Werner Herzog, who did, he's a great documentarian.
Yeah.
He says, I'm a filmmaker, and he says, I never shoot more than 12 hours of footage. And that if you have to shoot more, you're an idiot. I shoot 40 to 60. I'm not making movies. I'm making documentaries, and
Yeah.
we run and gun, which means we travel light.
Yeah.
And we go where the action is, and we don't know what we're going to film until we get there sometimes.
Yeah.
We have an idea. But so to us, 40 to 60 hours is pretty common. So
Yeah.
you need a camera that can hold up to that kind of pounding.
That's a lot. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So you've worked alongside indigenous communities across the globe. What have those relationships taught you about resilience and conservation and culture, particularly culture? Because some of those cultures, they intermix with other cultures nearby, the tribal thing. It's a little more.
Yeah, I've alluded to it a little bit, but a guy up in a place called Old Crow in northern Yukon, it's the last habited place before you hit the Arctic Ocean in Yukon, heading north.
Wow.
I went in there to shoot a little documentary related to what we were doing in education. And we met this guy, Brandon, Tikivevich. I know I have the last name wrong, but Brandon. And he was almost like a shaman, but too young to be an elder, but probably the wisest guy in town.
Wow.
And he said that you only need two things to be indigenous. You need to have a connection to the land and community. And it didn't matter if you were white, black, Chinese, whatever. That's what would make you indigenous. And so there wasn't this hatred towards Caucasians, for example, Europeans, that you in a lot of other places. And they didn't want to dwell on things like the negativity, the negative history of their people, even though they had every right to complain about certain things in their past. And what he said is, we got to look forward, because it's actually what's looking forward that's the most terrifying. And there's an old Gwich'in proverb. Gwich'in is the tribal
Gwich'in,
group.
yeah.
Gwich'in. And he said that,
I have a couple of cousins that are Gwich'in.
Really?
My aunt and uncle.
Up in Alaska? Alaska side?
In the Canadian side. My uncle and his wife, my aunt, they adopted two Gwich'in kids.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's amazing.
On Vancouver Island.
Well, so you'll know something about these amazing people. And he said, we have an old saying that there's going to come a time when almost all the animals and all people on Earth die. And there's going to be nothing we can do about it. And that's it. That's the proverb, or that's the story, because we haven't learned how to look after the land and the people properly.
Yeah.
And so he's made it his mission to protect his people, to preserve their culture, but then also to declare a state of emergency across the Arctic, especially, saying, look, we're seeing things change in real time. We're watching huge silt mud flows into our rivers, clogging the rivers up, killing off the fish. The caribou have changed their migration patterns because the ground's not frozen year-round the way it used to. But that's where they have their babies is different, and how we hunt is different, and all these kinds of things. And by the time I'd finished interviewing him, I was pretty much in tears, because I was like,
I can imagine.
We are so ignorant where we live. We have even our own ecosystems are changing rapidly, and you can see them in the way.
Absolutely, yeah. We've already paved a bunch of them over. Look at Southern California, paved it all over.
And you look at fires happening across Canada and kinds of things, and they're, whether you would like to admit it or not, it's reflective of change in our world systems. Anyway, I came away with that a new perspective, and have carried it with me since. So when I meet other indigenous groups, I start to see parallels in how they are trying to warn the rest of the world. Right. Look, you know what? You guys have to pay attention to this stuff. Like even when I was in Arunachal with the Wanchos, they were saying the same thing.
Yeah.
We've noticed things changing. Why are they changing? They don't know why, some of them.
Yeah.
But the guys up north know why, because they're connected to the rest of Canada.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's really crucial. And that idea of what makes us indigenous. So connection to the land and community. The connection to the land comes with a responsibility to look after it. to be a steward, rather than biblically it's to have dominion over, but that can be interpreted as to care for. And we've chosen dominion. So they make that distinction, and it's an important one.
Love it. Yeah, I love it.
Very eye-opening. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, we could have a whole podcast series on that
right?
one. It's like,
I know.
God. Yeah.
It's amazing people.
Yeah. And those of us that are of a certain age, you look back and think, God, you wish you'd done things different, and you want to apologize to people. But it is what it is. So from Nat Geo to the Discovery, Channel, you've worked with some big names. Can you share a behind the scenes moment from one of those shoots that was either wildly chaotic or unexpectedly moving?
I'll share two quick ones. One's not always quick. We had been filming for 2 weeks in Arunachal Pradesh among the Wancho people. It was going beautifully. All the people that we'd been connected with were coming through, and there were a few hiccups, but nothing major. But along the way, it was like, day 13 or 12, or I forget what it was. We get a message. Sorry, let me start it. Can I back up?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I can clean all that up.
It was day 7 of the shoot, and we receive a message through I called them my CIA operatives. I was the fixer, but I was also the cultural liaison. I was on camera sometimes. You never have one hat.
Yeah.
And one of them was keeping track of or keeping tabs on security. So we had 2 guys who were specifically there to hear what was going on in the valleys, and because it was very unusual that we were there. And the intel that reached me was that there was a group of guerrilla insurgents in the area who had heard that we had money, and they were coming up the valley to do something about it.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, shit. So I've got to tell somebody, because I can't keep this to myself. I would get sued or whatever. Worse, more importantly, it was about our safety. I have to.
Yeah, everybody be killed. Yeah.
I was with quite a well-known cameraman now and cinematographer, Pablo Durana. He works with Alex Honnold and all these guys.
Oh, wow.
Now.
Okay.
But anyway, he's gone on to do great things. But I was with Pablo at the time, and he goes, "Oh man, what do we do?" And so we chatted about it, and we decided we had to tell the director. First, we talked to someone else, because there was a guy, Adarsh, who was one of our fixers, and for the India side of things. He was very well connected and still is. Anyway, all good guys, right?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And he goes, "Look, you know what? I can talk to the Indian military, and they could help set up a perimeter." And we're like, okay, we're not putting anybody in danger. We're not putting this military. They don't have to fight off guerrilla insurgents.
Yeah. The last thing you want to do is bring in the military, because that escalates it.
And we tell the director, Jennifer Parton, and we didn't know this till later, but the first thing that went through her head was, I'm going to get raped, and this will be the end of my life.
Yeah.
And we didn't think of that, which was stupid of us, but her safety, of course, was also at the forefront, or should have been. So then we have to call Discovery, the folks at Discovery, via satellite phone, to get their take on it. And they defer to me. What do you think we should do, Dirksen? You're the one who did the risk analysis on this place. You came here scouting by yourself.
You got us into this.
And so, of course, we could see how it goes tomorrow, but then we should pull the sheet. And I said, you guys have to make the final decision. I gave them explanation of how dangerous this group was that was supposedly coming up the valley. They'd already kidnapped something like 30 children for their recruiting for their ranks.
Wow.
From the local villages. And so it was very real and present.
Yeah. And
so they decided to pull the chute. So we're depressed. It had taken us over a year to set all the permits, so on and so forth. That day, and I'm sorry, it's a bit of a long story, but that day, we were supposed to film this mock headhunt. This particular group of people used to be headhunters, and they were still very proud of their headhunting heritage. And their tattooing traditions were directly tied to their headhunting days. And the women's tattoos were directly tied to events in their lives. And it was this beautiful story. And these warriors, still warriors, especially guys over 50 who still remembered being warriors, were going to reenact what it was like to do a headhunt through the jungle to a neighboring village. If you're competing with a village for women, resources, whatever, you would go and you'd have to cut off a head, throw it in your head basket, bring it back to the village to prove that you'd had a successful head hunt. And foreigners had the same result befell them, because if you stumbled into Wancho territory, they'd kill you.
Wow.
And so you went into their what's called a morung, like a longhouse, and it was just stacked with skulls.
Oh, God.
Your fate. Your fate.
Staring at your fate.
So I had made the mistake. So it was myself, Pablo, and then a guy named Lars Krutek, who was the narrator of the show. He's a tattoo anthropologist. And so I have to come up with an excuse of why we're going to have to pull the chute that day. And we come up, I talked to the other two guys, and they said, okay, let's just say that there's a broken lens or something like that. We can't train. We can't.
All the batteries are dead.
Yeah, and the camera's not working.
Yeah.
And the camera we had was one of these big, beautiful $100,000 cameras. And so that's what I used. But the guy that I had as a local tribal fixer, he went ballistic.
Oh,
he was also an opium addict.
Oh,
and he made this crazy, he just lost his shit, crying on the ground, slamming his fists, all these kinds of things. And then he said, you're not leaving. You're not leaving. You can't leave. And I said, we have to leave. It's too dangerous. Sorry, I didn't say too dangerous. I said, we can't film if the camera's not working. We didn't want him to think that they had to risk their lives to protect us from insurgents. Long story short, I tell Lars, the narrator, get lost, go back to our main camp. He leaves. Pablo and I stay behind with the warriors in a tribal hut. And they say, you two are not leaving. So we're effectively, does that mean we're being held hostage?
Yeah.
So I said, I really need to get back. Pablo and I need to go. And they go, you're not leaving. And they put a guy with a gun on us. It looked more like a blunderbuss. It was like a homemade gun.
Okay,
but anyway,
got you.
We're at gunpoint. And they said, you're not leaving. And so I said, okay, so what do we do here? The warriors are told in their language that we're not going to be filming. And they just lose their minds.
Huh.
Because they've put so much work into planning this out. They're in tribal regalia. It's just beautiful stuff, all from the forest and all these things. And
right.
They've got their spears and all these things. And they're all yelling in my face, literally from what it feels like from me to you. And with their spears in my face. And,
oh, my God.
And I turn to the fixer, his name's and I say, Pongsa, man, like, you can't call them off. He goes, you did this. This is your problem. You tell them. And so I had done a bunch of research about this particular group, and I knew that they had recently converted to Christianity. And so that was the reason why they had stopped their tribal tattooing practices. It was considered pagan, right?
Yeah.
So I took a chance and I grabbed Pongsa's hand and I held it to my forehead in an act of submission. And I said, are you Christian? And he looks around, he's like, yes. I go, do you believe in forgiveness? And he's like, yes. I go, then you should be able to forgive me for the camera
what I'm about to
breaking. And I had made one other mistake. I was supposed to bring little bottles of whiskey for the warriors to drink, and that was a huge faux pas. Anyway, so I said, can you forgive me for the whiskey? He goes, I guess so. And then the warriors are all silent all of a sudden because they see me doing this act of submission.
Yeah. And
they're like, in their own language, they're saying, what is he saying? What is he saying? And so Pongsa talks to them. And then they start yelling at Pongsa. And then I go, Pongsa, what are they saying? He goes, they're telling me to shut up and just forgive you. And so I was held hostage with Pablo for about, I don't know, an hour. And so anyway, there's so much more to the story, but the short of it is that we end up with our cameras, our digital cameras, shooting, like photo shooting, these guys doing their headhunt through the jungle. And It was amazing. It was so amazing. And if I had my Sony A1 with me, I could have shot it in 4K, right? But in those days, most cameras didn't have the video and digital picture capability. And so Pablo and I are just dying, saying, oh man. So finally we get back after this head hunt. It's amazing. And of course, it's not a real head. They have this fake wooden head, and they pop it in a basket. They bring it back in huge ceremony.
Wow.
Then we've got to eat and drink. So it takes us 2 hours to eat and drink. And then Pongsa, because he has to save face in front of the warriors, says, now you're going to pay people. And so over the next 2 hours, we've got 50 grand on us or whatever it is in these butt packs. But we're trying to discreetly pay people. Right. We did say, if you are taken away from your field, we'll compensate you for the time you spent away from your field. But Pongsa starts going, and she brought us water. You pay her 50 rupees, and she bought it. This person did that, and he just starts. So I finally say to Pablo, sneak out, just head back, go.
Yeah,
I'll take care of this. I got enough money to cover it. So Pablo goes to tell the guys in our other camp what's going on. It's about an hour up the hill.
Wow.
And I've got a walkie-talkie, right? And Bill's got a walkie-talkie. So over the next hour, as I'm paying people, I keep making excuses. I've got diarrhea, man. I didn't have diarrhea, but I was going out to communicate with my walkie-talkie with these guys. And they kept this guy with the gun on me. So I had another hour or two of hostage crisis. But
you got out of that.
It took me 4 hours to pay everybody off. And then finally we hiked up this hill to where the emperor lived. And the emperor was a friend of mine, emperor of these 7 villages. And he was so sad that we were leaving, and we just let it roll. We just kept filming with this one other camera up there that we had. And we couldn't use the other one because we had already said it was dysfunctional.
Broken,
right?
yeah.
He talked again about, we will fight to the death if you're worried about the insurgents, and the camera is just the camera is an excuse. We'll fight to the death. And
we'll take that stuff seriously, I'll bet.
Oh yeah, and Pablo said nobody's dying to do some video here.
Jeez.
So, anyway, we ended up leaving safely. The emperor gave us some wonderful gifts, and the documentary got made. But it was very authentic at the end. And it was supposed to be sincere and authentic, and there were all these steps along the way that ironically forced us into being actually truly sincere.
Yeah. That's a great story. So holy cow, that's amazing.
Very short one. Another story was that being from the outside coming in, everybody always thinks in many tribal villages that you are a doctor, that you have medicine. So every evening we would have lineups of people come to see us, like we were the medicinal.
The shaman, yeah.
And the hardest thing that happened was Pablo came and got me from the emperor's hut and said, you got to come next door, man. I'm not really sure what to do. And I'd had some industrial first aid training. So I go next door, and there's a kid with 3rd-degree burns on all over his face and everything. And they had tried to bandage him up as well as they could, but the bandages were sticking to him, bandage, that kind of thing. And so we cleaned him up as good as we could, and we were just crying as we're doing it. Yeah. It was really hard. And so what we did was, though, we asked Discovery Channel if they could foot some money to get this kid to a burn specialist down in the lowlands, and to at least see a clinician in the nearby town. And so we managed to set that up. And that was really hard because you could see what a hard life these people actually have.
Oh, yeah.
So those are behind the scenes things.
All those things we take for granted, but then when you go out there, you just see what it's like without having it, and
exactly.
It moves you. Yeah. So all those stories. Do you have a favorite book?
I do. I saw the question, and I was like, oh man, okay.
I know guys like you and me probably have 6, 10 favorite books,
and it's usually based on genre. I've got my favorite mountain, but I would say if you were to talk about a book that overall kind of captures all the things that I love, it would be Mosquito Coast by Paul Theroux.
That's a good one.
And which was later made into a movie with Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren and that crowd, River Phoenix.
That's good. I don't think that's ever been mentioned. Yeah, that's a good one.
And the main reason is that it's about crisis in our home country. In this case, it's the United States, and he's leaving because he thinks there's going to be a World War III, and he takes him to this amazing adventure that starts off as paradise and turns into this hellscape. And Paul Theroux is such a good travel writer too, and so he brings in all his own personal. I don't know if you've read his travel stuff.
Yeah, I read a couple of things. Yeah, he's really good. I can't remember the name of him, but yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. How about a favorite piece of outdoor or photo gear that you always have with you?
I would go back to the tentacles.
Okay.
The gear, because I think sound in ultimately is more important, because if you can't hear, especially if people are speaking,
Yep.
because if you're straining to hear and the sound's just not good, it ruins the whole thing. It's,
Yep.
the visuals are 50%. The sound
Right.
is a 50%.
Yeah, if you can't hear, it's like a podcast. It's all sound, but if you can't hear, forget it. You're done. Yeah.
And the other thing is, in gear, it's anticipating, like receiving questions from you before, and it's really helpful. And I think when you sit down and if you take a journalistic approach to asking questions in an interview, they scaffold, right? And you try to build it up. And I really take that to heart, because I know I did some journalism training, and going in with a good set of questions and actually knowing a little bit about what you're getting into, actually researching it. And
Do a research.
because the interviewer is always, or interviewee is always more at ease if you understand a little bit about what they've had to deal with or where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Like you've done here.
Yeah, I think that question thing comes from my sales background. I think I'd always, whenever I'd go on a sales call, I'd always try to figure out my side of the deal first, so that I knew what I was going to ask and talk about, regardless of where they were going. So it carries over. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. And finally, what advice would you give to an aspiring adventurer? Let's make that filmmaker, an aspiring filmmaker that want to tell stories that matter.
I would say start with what you just said. Make stories that matter. Start with that. The story is the most important thing in any film you're going to make. You have a million decisions to make about that storyline, about the narrative arc. And if you don't start with that, then your visuals become less meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both know that you'll get these, you go to the Banff Mountain Film Festival and you get these amazingly visually spectacular pieces, but they have no substance. It's all just sexy shots. And that's their moneymaker, because people love seeing people ski down couloirs. But I've seen enough people do that. And when they add another human element to it, like 2 years ago when I forget the guy's name, he's out of Colorado or somewhere, but he's paralyzed from the waist down, and he skis with a uni ski or a sit ski. And he goes off he's training to go off this famous jump. And you just see there's this whole new dimension to skiing. Skiing's not the focus. The focus is his resilience, like you said.
Yeah.
And he's indigenous. And so he's got this whole thing going on. And it becomes this beautiful story. And it won the best documentary overall. And you ask yourself, why? It's because they had a story that they didn't have to fake. This kid was everything. And they really delved into what made him tick, what made him cry, and that became what mattered. And so I wanted to do that with this documentary, but unfortunately I just didn't have the footage by the end of it. So you do the best what you can.
Sure.
You still try to build the story arc and so on.
Yeah.
And so start there. Start with what you said. Start with a story that you think matters.
Yeah, that's a good one.
If you don't, it'll fall apart like a house of cards. It just does.
Yeah, if you don't start there, it's pretty hard to build around something that you don't have a core thesis for. So that's that's good.
And an addendum to that would be having a couple generations of students who can now give me feedback. I say, what was the most important thing that you learned in my film class? And they're like, that story matters first. That was pretty cool, because this is from a lot of kids who were very very reticent to pick up that torch.
Yeah.
And then they said, I hit this moment where I just thought, what is this about? I'm doing all this stuff and I'm expending money and all these things, but for what?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you only need to go through that once.
Yeah, right? That's right. Yeah. Well, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Rick.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, ricksays.com, where you'll find show notes and links to everything we talked about and more. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, or spread the word and tell a friend. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week, and thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast.